They're attacking him and saying that he ought to be done for crimes against humanity because he has dared to betray the trust they had put in him as the author of this actually rather half-baked...
But he's saying it's become a distraction from real environmental issues.
Well, that, of course, is absolutely correct. Those of us who believe in looking after the planet's environment properly don't want all the money diverted away from stopping deforestation.
To Goldman Sachs.
Away from, to Goldman Sachs to run this carbon trading worldwide. It's not just Goldman Sachs, because it was Lehman Brothers. They were right into this with Al Gore on the board. And they went under because their eye was off the ball. They were so busy posturing about climate and trying to corner the market, which they hoped would be a global one, in the right to trade carbon dioxide.
They were shooting the moon. They were going for everything.
And they went under. And that is what has happened. The Chicago Climate Exchange collapsed last year when the...
Well, that's my next question. They're collapsing on every front, but they're only viciously more attacking. How big a deal is it that their entire program is now being revealed? I mean, what do you expect them to do? Because they're still flailing around.
That's the thing. When they start getting really extreme, and they start really screeching like this, you know they've lost. One of my first battles with the Inland Revenue in the UK, they wrote over a year a series of letters saying, we want you to come for interview under caution about your tax affairs and those of your clients. And I said, fine, just tell me what criminal offence you think I've committed, not just the legal characterisation, but the factual particulars. I am entitled under the European Human Rights Convention to be told before I agree to be interviewed. You tell me, I'll come. You don't tell me, I won't come. And they spent a year writing more and more vicious letters. And in the end, they wrote one so vicious that my lovely wife, who opened it, burst into tears, because she's a very sensitive lass, very sweet lass, my lovely wife. And she burst into tears. She was horrified at what they were saying about me. And she rang me up, because I was actually in Cyprus at the time, and she was in Scotland. And she said, I've just had this really terrible letter, floods of tears over the phone. What do we do about it? I said, we don't even need to reply. She said, what do you mean? I said, that is their instrument of capitulation. The more savage they become, the more they know they've lost. And all this governing class has made two huge mistakes, which are now visible to everybody. The first was the euro, which was constructed along lines which were bound to fail. I predicted in detail how and when and why it would fail, and it's all come to pass exactly as it wasn't difficult to work out.
That's what I want you to do. Look more into your crystal ball. Give us the other point.
The other is the global warming thing, which the entire governing class bet the farm on this, particularly on the left. But you've got wishy-washy centre-right parties like the Conservatives in the UK going along with it. But the real enthusiasm for it was always on the hard left, and it is wrong, and everybody now knows it's wrong. There was NOAA saying if you get 15 years without global warming, the models were wrong. We've had 15 years without global warming. It's over. The scare is over. The results are in, and the truth is out, and the scare is over. And what has happened is that the governing class, which likes to present itself as omniscient and omnipotent...
And invincible.
And invincible, exactly. They are now shown to have got feet of clay. They are shown to have got things wrong. And because people can see that they've got things wrong, it is that cynicism now on the part of...
It's a collapse of credibility.
Which is this complete collapse of credibility, which I think may yet save democracy.
Well, that's what I was about to say. Yeah. People have this idea, especially from the churches that have been World Council of Churches paid off, that it's the end of the world, you can't fight evil, that's the way it is. History's the opposite. When good men fight evil, all we have is victory. Sure, we're going to lose, the battles are going to be hard, but those that persevere win. We can rout these people, and every time we engage them in the info war, their Death Stars blow into 1 trillion pieces. Yeah. So what are the new targets? Because I'm ready to attack.
Right. Well, I think what we do now is we press home our advantage on the EU. The only future for the EU now, both as a currency and as a political entity, is disintegration. It's no longer possible or right to keep this together. The peoples of Europe want out. If you had a vote in Britain now, 60-40, we would vote to come out of the EU.
So it's going to disintegrate like the Soviet Union.
That'll disintegrate. What we've got to make sure is that at the Rio conference, where the milk and water current draft of the conclusions of the conference will be replaced by something much more extreme, we do not let our governments get away with that. Now, Alex, I'll do a deal with you here. I will go to Rio. I will get a copy of the final draft when it comes out and before it is finalized in negotiation. I will tell you what's in it. And then if what is in it is in any way unsuitable, you get on the air, tell people what's in it, and make absolutely sure that they get in touch with their senator and their congressman and with the White House and say, we will not have our democracy taken away. We will not have our powers and our wealth transferred to the UN in the name of sustainable economic development or environmental development, when in fact we are perfectly capable as a nation of regulating our own affairs, and we do not need these people, particularly if they're not elected by us, telling us how we should run our affairs. So that's the central point. The central point here is that if we just take out this Constitution again, may I do that? And if I just cite Article 1, Section 1, all legislative power herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Congress, Senate and House of Representatives, period. All power to make laws for you or give taxes to you or impose taxes on you, those powers should be in the hands of people whom you elect.
And it's the same thing with the House of Commons and Lords, but the bureaucracy, they've stolen it.
The Commons and Lords gave it away. I remember having a big row with my father about this when the Treaty of Maastricht came up for voting. That was the treaty which finally gave away Britain's sovereignty and gave away our democracy.
But any treaty that's a fraud can be null and void. It's time to tear it up.
And I said to him, don't vote for this. Well, he wanted to vote for it, but in fact, I was so angry, his vote was discounted. And even so, that by a huge majority, the House of Lords also voted to hand Britain's democracy away. And this was a disgraceful betrayal. And I want to reverse this now. We have got to start saying to the governing class of the world, we will not be bullied. We will not have our democracy taken away. If you want to set up international institutions, then they must be elected by all the peoples of the countries who constitute those institutions. We will not transfer any more powers by treaty to any international organization that is not elected. It's a simple enough rule. It's Monckton's rule that in future, no more Mr. Nice Guy. We do not give up our powers of our Congress that are voted for by us to anyone else overseas unless that institution is elected by our people as well as the peoples of the other.
And here to that, but let me bring up some examples.
Yeah.
Congress stopped declaring war in the 50s, but they still gave their authorization, and you just read out of the Constitution. Now Obama has said, I don't get any authorization from you, even though they fund it and are supposed to.
Yeah.
But he went one further. He said the UN gives me the orders in a public letter and statements.
Yeah.
I mean, that is treason. I mean, that is not just the president saying I'm Julius Caesar. That's bad enough.
Yeah.
But at least it was a Roman being a dictator. This is saying I am an agent of the UN.
Yes.
I mean, that is beyond. And this is what we've come to.
And I think the only future for the UN is there are two ways it can go. It can be elected or it must be disbanded. The UN has long outlived what little usefulness it had. It now simply sucks in money to itself. Only 1 cent on the dollar is paid out.
But it murders people everywhere.
Exactly.
It lines them up and shoots them to take their land. And I got liberals coming to my door saying, give money for UNICEF. And I'm like, the UN murders them. The UN wants to turn their power off.
Well, unfortunately, this actually happened in Uganda, of course. I mean, you may think that Alex is being extreme merely because he shouts down the microphone. But unfortunately, he's outraged.
It happened in Honduras.
It actually happened in Honduras. It happened in Uganda. And all sorts of unspeakable crimes are now being committed in the name of the UN, and really at its instigation.
And for the earth. I mean, they say we're...
This is a storyline, of course, but what is really going on here is that those who like the idea that they should rule from the center and that we, the people, ought not to have any say in the matter because we don't care enough about these things or don't know enough about these things, they want to stitch us up with a world government if they can. And when I first mentioned this, people said, oh, well, Monckton is just a conspiracy theorist. So I said, right, go and read. You can get it now, still on the UN website. I don't think they've taken it down yet. Annex 1, paragraphs 36 and 38 of the Copenhagen Treaty draft of the 15th of September 2009, where you will find in both of those paragraphs the word government mentioned in a context which is clearly that of world government. And then read the rest of that treaty, and you'll see it was essentially the bureaucratic structure for this world government that this treaty was setting out in 186 pages, and then tell me there was and is...
Well, the Financial Times of London,
a world government.
Newsweek, they all come out and say world government's the answer.
That's right. This is the growing trend, and it's all being manipulated. And the thing that we, the people, should do is to say, fine, if there's to be a world government, we elect it. If we don't elect it, then we give it no powers.
We'll be right back, Lord Monckton, with phone calls straight ahead. Lord Christopher Monckton, scienceandpublicpolicy.org. I'm Alex Jones of planetinfowars.com. All right, we're going to your phone calls. John in Ohio, you're on the air with Lord Monckton. Go ahead.
Hey, thanks for taking my call.
Yes, sir. Welcome.
I just got a quick comment and a question for Lord Monckton.
Sure.
My comment is alchemy and the Federal Reserve. I think those are pretty much the same thing.
Ha.
And I was wondering if they see, because the carbon tax thing, the global warming, it's fallen. I was just wondering if there's any other targets they might be going after other than carbon to try to get whatever they're trying to push through with the global warming.
Yes, I think what they're going to do now is to take the environment as a whole as their big issue. They've lost on carbon now. They know that. Of course, they don't want to admit it because governments can never...
So they're going back to cave bugs and polar bears that can't swim.
That's right. They'll be going back to that. They'll be going back to the whole question that every time humans do anything, they affect the environment around them. Well, of course we do. And they're effectively going to say what we need is massive depopulation and, in particular, a massive deindustrialization.
They've been saying it openly, get rid of people, kill children up to age 3. I mean, what a group of loonies.
That's the thing. We are dealing with extremists who hate the West. This is still the main motive. They don't care about the environment. John, one of my great friends was a lovely man called Eric Ellington, who was one of the founders of Greenpeace. And he, like me, and like you, I think, was a genuine environmentalist, really concerned about the true environmental problems of the planet. And he said within 3 years, we all had to leave Greenpeace because it was taken over by Marxists. And he said, we were all non-political. We didn't know how to stop them. They took over our movement, and they turned it into a political movement to destroy the West. It ceased to be genuinely about the environment. But you still get, of course, thousands of people giving money to Greenpeace every year because they think it's about the environment, when in fact what they're doing is furthering what used to be called Marxism, and now it's called...
Absolutely. Let's go to another. Thank you, John. CJ in Michigan, you're on the air with Lord Christopher Monckton.
Hey, greetings.
Hello, CJ.
How you doing? Yeah, Mike. Well, I got a comment. You remember, Alex? They already were asking to burn down people's houses that were climate deniers.
Oh, that's right. They've had all these professors and people come out and say, arrest people, ignore the republic, ignore the right of the voters, these professors. And they said, yes, burn our houses down.
And indeed, Professor Richard Lindzen of MIT, who is perhaps the world's foremost atmospheric scientist, he really understands how all this works, and he says there's no problem with the climate caused by us. He has had his house burnt down in circumstances which are clearly suspicious. Now, of course, we can't infer from that this was climate extremism.
Well, we know they burned down houses in ski resorts.
And indeed, it's quite a fashionable thing. After all, most of the people who signed the Declaration of Independence had their houses burnt down by British loyalists at the time. So it is a kind of, I won't say a recognised method of protest, and you certainly don't do this at home, but it is a way in which extremists like to put their point. And I think it's got to be firmly discouraged. All this talk about treating those who dare to question the scientific nonsense behind global warming as though they were some sort of serious criminals against humanity, which, as I say, that's a sentence of death if you're regarded as having committed a crime against humanity. That kind of thing has got to be resisted. We've got to say that this kind of thing will not pass. We're not having it.
I agree, and we've got to recognize the type of wild authoritarians we're talking about here. I mean, these really are bad people.
These are the crazies.
And when they're in control, the entire government becomes something that is alien to the country.
That's right.
And we have to recognize just how bad it is. I mean, they've tried to dumb us down, but the West has had so much freedom that the sleeping giant is reawakening. Christopher and others, your calls are straight ahead. Back in 60 seconds. Then Max Kaiser. You know, an hour and 20 minutes has just gone by way too quick with Lord Monckton, but Max Kaiser's coming up. It's going to be sad to see Lord